Imagine this. It's the longest day of the year, the early morning sun casting gold over Washington's most iconic peak, Mount Rainier. 12 climbers stand at 12,300 feet on the Ingraham Glacier, roped together, their crampons biting into hard ice. It's June 21st, 1981, and the air is crisp, filled with the sound of crunching snow and quiet determination. They're just hours from the summit. For some, this is a bucket list achievement. For others, it's a spiritual test. But none of them know that only 5 will make it back. Viewer discretion is advised. This video contains accounts of fatal accidents that may be distressing to some viewers. Mount Rainier is beautiful, jaw-dropping, majestic. But it's also one of the most dangerous mountains in North America. It holds glaciers like ticking time bombs, and on that summer morning, the mountain was rumbling quietly with deadly intent. Without warning, a massive serac, an overhanging chunk of glacial ice the size of a building, broke free from the headwall above. In seconds, 30 tons of ice came crashing down. There was no time to run, no time to scream, just impact. What followed became one of the deadliest climbing disasters in U.S. history. The story is as haunting as it is tragic. Not just because of the deaths, but because of how close the survivors were to dying, how preventable it might have been, and how the mountain gave no second chances. This is the full account of the Ingraham Glacier disaster, a story of ambition, miscalculation, nature's fury, and the fine line between adventure and tragedy. The group that set out that day was made up of experienced mountaineers and ambitious novices alike. The trip was led by Rainier Mountaineering, Inc., RMI, the most well-known guide service on the mountain. RMI had a strong reputation. Its guides were trained, equipped, and intimately familiar with the dangers of Rainier. On this particular expedition, 3 guides were in charge. Dave Johnston, a mountaineering veteran, Greg Wilson, a seasoned climber and instructor, and Hugh Gallagher, also highly experienced. With them were 9 clients, eager for a summit attempt. Mount Rainier stands 14,411 feet above sea level. And although that's far shorter than Everest or Denali, it's no less deadly. The Ingraham Glacier route, also called the Disappointment Cleaver route, is popular, but not safe. The glacier is riddled with deep crevasses and unstable ice formations that can shift or collapse without warning. Climbers must cross snow bridges and carefully navigate around massive seracs hanging above the trail. The plan for June 21st was to reach the summit and descend before noon, a window that allowed climbers to avoid the warmest part of the day when ice becomes dangerously unstable. The group left Camp Muir, a base camp at 10,188 feet, in the early morning hours, roped into 3 teams. They made solid progress through the lower glacier in the dark, illuminated by the glow of headlamps and the rising sun. By 6:30 a.m., the group had reached an elevation of about 12,300 feet on the Ingraham Glacier. They stopped to rest beneath a massive ice wall, an overhanging serac on the glacier's headwall. This was not unusual. Many climbing teams paused there to hydrate, adjust gear, and regroup. But that morning, the mountain was unstable. Without warning, an enormous serac broke loose from the wall above. The sound was deafening, like a freight train rushing down from the heavens. In a matter of seconds, ice the size of houses came crashing down onto the group below. It was an ambush of nature. One moment the climbers were resting, the next, chaos erupted. 5 climbers, including all 3 guides, were positioned just outside the impact zone. They watched in horror as the serac obliterated their companions. Those caught in the fall were swept into crevasses or buried beneath tons of ice. Screams were drowned by the roar of the avalanche. The survivors were in shock. Some tried desperately to reach those who had vanished, but the debris field was impassable. Serrated chunks of ice, twisted rope, shattered equipment. It was immediately clear that no one could have survived beneath it. A rescue attempt was impossible. Dave Johnston, one of the surviving guides, used his radio to call for help. He reported a major ice fall with multiple fatalities. The tone in his voice was clipped, controlled, but underneath was trauma and disbelief. Back at Camp Muir and down at the base of the mountain, rescue operations launched into action. Helicopters from the National Park Service and military were scrambled, but even from the air there was little they could do. The icefall had transformed the glacier into a maze of broken seracs and deep pits. The official count was 7 dead, 6 clients, and 1 guide. Their bodies were never recovered. The glacier had claimed them, and they remain entombed in ice to this day. For the survivors, the descent was agonizing. The walk back to Camp Muir was silent, interrupted only by the crunch of boots in the distant wind. At camp, there were no cheers, no celebrations, just the heavy silence of a mission turned nightmare. News of the disaster hit headlines across the country. It was the worst climbing tragedy on Mount Rainier up to that point. People demanded answers. Why were they resting beneath an unstable serac? Should the guides have known better? In the months that followed, RMI and the National Park Service conducted investigations. They concluded that the icefall was unpredictable. The serac had been stable for weeks. It had been a resting spot for dozens of teams before. But on that day, the mountain shifted. The Ingraham Glacier disaster forced mountaineering organizations to revisit safety protocols. Guides began warning climbers more explicitly about icefall zones. Resting beneath seracs became strongly discouraged, if not banned outright. The tragedy reshaped how Rainier was approached. But for the families of the lost, no policy could bring them back. Many of the victims were in their 20s and 30s, full of life and eager to conquer something greater than themselves. They had trusted their guides, trained for months, spent thousands of dollars, and in seconds they were gone. In the years since, the mountain has taken more lives. Mount Rainier continues to be a beautiful but merciless peak. Those who climb it now walk in the shadow of those who didn't return. A small memorial plaque at Camp Muir bears the names of the 7 who died on June 21, 1981. It sits quietly among the rocks, passed by hundreds of climbers every year. Some stop to read it, others walk by without noticing. But the mountain remembers, and so do we. This is the story of the Ingraham Glacier disaster, a lesson written in ice echoing across the summit winds of Mount Rainier. If you're enjoying this survival story, like and follow for more content.